Hi everybody. In the previous video, we learned how to create links between your web pages. In today's video, we will learn another essential process. Register and submit input from users with the post form HTML tag on your web page. Capture the form and input in the view task with a post request. Pass the input to the return of the task with context, and showing it in the browser with the Django context output tag. Let's open the command prompt. By now you should know the startup process very well. CD into the P1 folder. Activate the virtual environment. CD into your project folder. Start the development server and check in the browser if all still works as expected. It does. Let's check it in the editor. Note that we already added everything as preparation. We will first check what has been added on the home page. Most is standard HTML. 2 new lines. Then the standard HTML post form. Form is the HTML tag. And we will use the post method. Now a little difference with a normal href link. Although the action is also linked to a URL, it is linked to the name of the URL. We will show you in a minute what that means. Mind all character details. Quotations, accolades, percentages. Now comes a pure Django tag that has to be added to each form to protect the data. CRSF_token. Mind all characters. Now we have the input HTML tag, allowing users to enter input a plain text format. We give it a name which we will use to capture the data in our view task. The placeholder is the standard text mentioned in the input field. Now we also need a button so that users can click something while making sure the form is submitted. You can write what you want within the tag. We labeled the button Submit. Some HTML tags need a closing tag. Now comes the important Django tag to show data. Mind the double accolades. Now let's go to our URLs file and see what the name of a URL is. We simply chose and added a name. It's our habit to use the same name as the view task, but without the capitals. See the connection? Our URL name is homepage, and that is how we call it in the form. And whenever the user pushes the button, the form will be submitted through the URL name to the task defined in the views. Let's check the task. We added Django logic. First, adding context, which is nothing more than a box of space to temporarily store data. We start with an empty box. Mind the tab. Now we have our first if statement. A very important statement in each programming language. Mind the colon, new rule, and tab. It will verify if the post method has been triggered by a click on the submit button. See the connection? If true, then get the input defined by the name in the input field in the form and store it in a temporary variable. See the connection? It will store the input in this variable. Now we will store the variable in our context box, keeping the same name for traceability. If the statement is true or not, in both cases we will add the context to the return. If the statement is not true, the context should be empty. If true, the context should contain the user's input. Done. Now we can check our submit application. When we submit nothing, the context box should be empty and the output should be nothing. When we write something, the context box should contain our input. We should see the same as a result. And we do. Our homepage now shows our input. And when we refresh our page, our context box is again empty as no post method was triggered and the variables are always temporary. In the meantime, we try another submit. Works perfectly. Our Django show data tag shows our input. And another empty submit. Empty as expected. And a page refresh. Also empty as expected. Now we will make a little variation by adding if-else statements. This will allow us to have an output message in all three scenarios. Text submit, empty submit, page refresh. We paused the video and added the code as preparation. First, checking the home page. As you see, nothing has changed. We still have the same post form. And our important Django tag to show output data. In the URLs, also nothing has changed. But in the homepage task in the views, we have added some extra Python logic. Let's see what we did. Our first line is the same, adding our empty context box. Our second line, the if statement, to check if a post method was triggered, also is the same. But on the same indentation, one tab, we have added the else statement below. Mind the colon and extra tab within the statement. The if-else statement programming logic is very simple. If the if statement is not true, then execute the task in the else statement. In our case, it means we will overwrite the user input with a character string and store it in our context box. We have now covered one scenario. If there is no post submit, the page should display our message. In case there is a post submit, we will first capture the user's input from the form using the name of the input field and store it in our variable. Now we will insert a new if-else statement to check the value of our variable. If the user pushed the submit button without entering text, we have an empty input which is represented by empty quotations in Python. Mind the colon after the statement and extra tab within the statement. So if the statement is true because the user's input is empty, we will overwrite our variable with a character string. And we will store the variable in our context box. With this we covered the second scenario. Now if the statement was not true, and the user did write something, we will execute the else statement. Mind the colon after the statement and extra tab within the statement. In this case, we are back to our original task. We will store the user's input, retrieved in our original post request, to our context box. And with this we have all our scenarios covered. Let us remind you about the importance of indentations. If-else statements are on the same indentation. And if they come within another if-else statement, an extra indentation is added. This is called nested statements, and they can span several indentations. In each of the scenarios, a different message is stored in the context box. We add the context box to our return. Let us remind you about the connection between the context added in the task and retrieving it in the template with the Django data output tag. The name between the double accolades is the name of our context box, which is in brackets and quotations in our task. You can give it any name you want, as long as you change the name in the Django tag too. Concerning the return, because we put it on the same indentation as the first if-else statements, and at the bottom of the task, it will be executed for all scenarios. We could replace it with 3 returns, one on the first else statement, one on the second if statement and one on the second else statement. We would have the same results. Feel free to test. On a final note, the process of submit and capture input is essential. So take the time to make sense of the process, code, and tags used. Don't forget to save your work. Let's test. First, a page refresh displays the correct message, and an empty submit. Again, we see the correct message. And if we input text, We see the correct output. Again, an empty submit. And a page refresh. All works perfectly. Lastly, let's see the importance of indentation by removing a tab, which should create an error. Saving our changes. The page takes a long time to load, which is already an indication of troubles. Troubles confirmed. We have an indentation error, as there is one which is not on the correct level. Let us restore it to the correct level. 1 tab extra. And as always, saving our changes. Still no connection. When this happens, a refresh of the development server helps. Ctrl+C. The development server is back up and running. And so is our web page. This was it for today's video. Please leave us a comment if you are encountering problems with your code. We will certainly try to help. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you in the next video.